Imagine you could step inside the minds of Canada's healthcare leaders, glimpse their greatest fears, strongest drivers, and what makes them tick. Welcome to Healthcare Changemakers, a podcast where we talk to leaders about the joys and challenges of driving change and working with partners to create the safest healthcare system.
Hey listeners, it's Philip here from HEROC. Thanks again for taking time out of your day to listen to Healthcare Changemakers. It means the world to us. And after listening, if you've captured a great takeaway, I encourage you to tell a colleague or help us amplify the insight you've received by sharing this episode or your thoughts on LinkedIn. On today's show, we welcome Andrew Williams. He's the president and CEO of the Huron-Perth Health Alliance. My CEO, Catherine Galton, actually introduced me to Andrew at a CCHL event and described him as a go-to resource on all things leadership in healthcare. And as you'll quickly hear in a few moments, she's absolutely right. A few keywords that jumped out to me personally during our chat include words like trust, transparency, relationships, adapting, growing, and taking risks. Andrew's advice will definitely resonate with all leaders. So here's your 30-second warning. Be sure to grab a pen and paper as you'll likely be jotting down some great tips today. Okay, let's get to it. Welcome, Andrew, to Healthcare Changemakers. How's your day going so far?
Day has been great so far, Philip. It's beautiful and sunny outside my office, and looks like spring is trying to catch hold. So great time of the year.
Well, we're glad to have you on. So before we get to the hard-hitting questions, Andrew, I thought I'd start off by asking, what's your favorite TV show right now or a book you're reading?
Well, I have become hooked on the miniseries Reacher.
Yes, I love it.
The third season is just dropping now, so that is taking up my time on TV. Although, for those who know me well, they would know I would be not truthful if I didn't say that Saturday mornings you can probably find me watching a Hallmark movie. So, yeah. So I have both ends of the spectrum apparently when it comes
That's
to
very good.
TV interests. Yeah,
eclectic taste and fun. I don't know if you started season 3 yet, but as I was watching the beginning of season 3, I was telling Catherine, our CEO, about High Notice. It's definitely filmed in St. John's in Newfoundland. A few of the episodes I can see from the background of Water Street, and that was a fun fact.
No, and it's really interesting when you watch a lot of these series, and Hallmark is good that way too. How much of the production is in Canada, right? It's great. It's nice to see. We always have to say and watch the credits at the end to see where the filming took place. Yeah.
No, it's very good to be proud of our Canadian spots and a variety of shows and TVs and movies, yes. Yeah, and I guess the next question is, what was your first job ever, your very first job?
My very first job, so we were living in Heart's Desire, which was just outside of Ottawa, and I delivered newspapers. And so I probably would have been 11 or 12 when I started that. My first job where I actually had a paycheck was at a store called the Foot Locker.
Oh yeah,
and I made $2.65 an hour, which somewhat dates me to your listeners. But there you go.
No, all the listeners they will all relate. Don't worry. Okay, good. We got some good questions out of the way. So for those who don't know you, can you share a bit about Huron-Perth Healthcare Alliance and its mission? I guess including how partnership and collaboration plays a big role for you and your team.
Yeah, sure. So I work with an organization called the Huron-Perth Healthcare Alliance, and we formed in 2003, and we include 4 hospitals: Clinton Public Hospital, St. Mary's Memorial Hospital, Seaforth Community Hospital, and Stratford General Hospital. And when we came together, we were actually the first voluntary alliance in Canada where where the boards decided to walk away from their own governance and create one new board, go to one fully integrated medical staff. And a big part of that was a very strong belief that we're stronger together. Mm-hmm. And so when we started to really think about the HPHA, as we call it, and kind of the marker we wanted to put in the sand, our vision is innovating for exceptional health. And I think it really speaks to, where we see healthcare today is the role that it plays in not only the work that we do in the hospital sector, but also the broader health and wellness of the community. So as the organization has evolved, we're big on collaboration. We're very focused on our what we call our guiding principles of people, partnership, and performance, and make sure that every year, in addition to providing great care in the moment across our 4 sites, we're trying to push the envelope in those 3 areas from a stretch goal perspective. But we've been in place. This is our 22nd year as an organization, and I've had the privilege to be the CEO for that entire time.
It's amazing. As you described how everything came together and you built that foundation, I guess something that comes to mind, and many leaders listening, is how did you, and we often hear about, how change management is so hard and bringing people together, all that jazz. Is there like a piece of advice or an aha moment or a learning from when the team, like you said, had that to build that voluntary alliance? And the first one in Canada is amazing too. Was there something that helped drive that momentum?
That's a really great question, and I think healthcare is important to everybody, and certainly in smaller communities, it's very visible, and people are very passionate about it. They don't want to lose control.
Mhm,
They want to make sure they can influence the decisions. I think the key to me in the approach that we took was developing a level of trust
mhm,
where people, may not be totally comfortable with losing a bit of control, but their view from a bigger picture point of view, because there was a high level of trust, they knew that the decisions that would be made would be in the interests of the people that we represented. So I would say that the most important criteria for any successful partnership is a high level of trust, where you're confident that the interests of all are equally viewed by the participants.
That's good. I love that advice about trust, and it's very, very important. And it's a good segue to my next question about. I was going to congratulate you on the completion of the cancer and medical care clinic and pharmacy at Stratford General Hospital. And so, it's obviously involves partners and people and getting things done and making impact. What does this new clinic mean in terms of advancing patient care?
Yeah, it was a great opening a couple of weeks ago, and we have a chemo clinic that is a satellite with London Health Science Centre. So again, the partnership piece, and we've had it located here for a long time. The space that it was in was really shoehorned into our 1953 vintage hospital, so it wasn't ideal for the environment that we really wanted to promote. And so we went to our foundation and really asked and said, "Hey, we'd love you to support this." And when I look at the project where it is today, we're actually treating patients today. It's fully operational. It started a couple of weeks ago. What it really reinforced for me, 2 things. First of all, facilities and contemporary facilities have a really positive impact on the quality of care you're able to provide, both through the
Mm,
lens of the patient and the staff members. So having new facilities is great that way. Equally importantly, though, these sorts of developments remind me how key the relationships between hospitals and their communities are.
mm,
We would not have been able to do this had the community not stepped forward and donated their hard-earned money towards this project. So it's fantastic for care. It means an awful lot to obviously the patients who are receiving care now, those who will need to access the unit moving forward. But it just for me is a really good reminder about how important good, strong community relations are. Good awareness of the importance of healthcare is to those who we serve.
I'll tap into, I guess, you and your team's expertise on how do you tap into that kind of community support. Is there something obviously you mentioned just now, trust. So you definitely have garnered the trust of a community. But are there any other injects you do to meet with community members or get their feedback on whatever the initiative, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, trust is a big part of it, and as you would expect, over the years, as our organization has changed, we've had lots of opportunity to engage, with our communities, with our municipal partners, and I think, the key for me is being visible, being
Mm,
transparent, being accessible, but also pushing that envelope, right? Because
yeah.
one of the worst things that we can do, I think, in healthcare is not change. Change can be very challenging on a whole bunch of different levels. So if you have good relationships and you are visible, you communicate well, you make sure the information that people need to perhaps understand, they may not agree, but understand why you're making the decisions that you are. I think that carries the day at the end of it. But as your listeners will know, it's a very challenging space to be in when you're trying to look at new models of care, new approaches to delivery, changes in services, a lot of things, a lot of moving parts that will engage people, right? And everybody's got an opinion on healthcare, and which is great in a lot of ways. But you have to make sure that you are very clear with what you're doing, why you're doing it. Be open to feedback and input. We're very lucky to have an outstanding local board that has very passionate individuals from across our four communities, and others who step forward in our foundations, for example, who can make sure that they're advocating with their peers and their colleagues around the work that we're doing and why we're doing it.
I love the fact that you mentioned that not changing can be a problem too, and and you totally were upfront by saying change can be a challenge. I'm glad you said that because people often think, oh, just keep doing the same if it's not broken, and you're pushing boundaries and making that change happen. And I think that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on this show.
Well,
Is-
but one of the things that I think it's also important to remember, we've all heard the saying, definition of insanity is do the same thing the same way and expect a different outcome.
yeah.
But by not, there's no such thing as not changing,
Hmm.
right? You either proactively change and go a certain direction, or you fall behind,
Yeah.
right? Because every day that you're not adapting yourself or
Hmm.
growing yourself or focusing on where's the organization going, you are slipping a little bit behind. So,
Yes.
as hard as sometimes it is to stand up and say we need to go a different direction, the result of not doing that 5, 10 years down the road to me is worse. So it's a catch 22, but there's no such thing as not changing. The question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to do it proactively and positively, or
Hmm.
reactively and often negatively?
That's amazing advice. And speaking of that kind of diversity of thought, your personal 30 plus years of experience in healthcare leadership includes anywhere from teaching and research hospitals to the community sector to private clinics. So, what advice would you give to healthcare leaders listening now on being exactly what you just said, being adaptive to change and being a strong leader, regardless of where your setting is or who you're leading?
Yeah, it's a really a great question, and as I said earlier, it's a privilege to work in the healthcare space, and I always believe that with that privilege comes an accountability to make a difference, and so when I'm talking to other leaders in the system, or new leaders, or people who are thinking of getting into leadership, the first thing I will say is you got to love what you do. You
Hmm.
have to really enjoy the role. There's going to be days, like in any job, where it's very challenging, very frustrating, but overall you have to have a positive attitude, positive outlook. You have to enjoy
Yeah.
it. I had a great bit of advice once from one of my mentors, and she said to me, "Bloom where you're planted."
Oh, that's
In
nice.
other words, really make sure that you're focusing all your energy and effort and doing the absolute best you can in whatever role you're in. And I know a lot of people who, are on a career track and they're thinking, okay, what's my next move, and where am I going to be 5 or 10 years from now? And what I'll say to them is that the most important thing you can do to have a successful career track is excel in the role you're in the moment, and develop yourself. Make sure that you're focusing on what I believe to be, the really important attributes, for leadership, being accountable for your actions, making sure your actions are founded in integrity, and make sure that you are very attuned to those that you represent. Because ultimately, if you're a leader in any organization, and we're seeing why leadership matters right now, south of us,
Hmm.
you're impacting the lives of those you represent, and you have got to make sure that when you're making decisions, that lens has to be brought to the table so that you make the right decisions, not only for the organizations that you represent, but the people that you represent, which is even more important. But again, the advice that I give is really enjoy what you do, focus on developing yourself, those around you, and make sure that as you plan your career, you're willing to go different directions, because it can take you. And I've been very fortunate in my career to go, in different ways than maybe I thought initially. But it all was really focused on enjoying and valuing the work that you do.
Oh my gosh, you give so much good advice. My pen is like running out of ink because you're giving me so much good advice. And I can hear the
Uh,
passion in your voice as well, Andrew. So speaking, of the years of healthcare leadership, I guess, and hearing the passion, your passion in your voice, and joy for what you do. Are there one or two proud moments that stick out in your mind that you've carried with you?
Yeah, I've been around a long time, so I'm old, which is
No, you're not
so.
old.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. But this is, I suppose, the advantage of this being on audio is it's not quite as evident, perhaps, about how old I am. But there you are. I think, I mean, first of all, I would be remiss if I didn't say that what I'm most proud of is the fantastic relationships that I've had the privilege of developing and growing and sustaining throughout my career. Right? I mean,
Hmm.
healthcare. If healthcare is nothing, it's people looking after people, right?
Yeah.
It's people supporting people, and so that I look at that. But from a tangible point of view, I would kind of be remiss. I don't like focusing on the pandemic, obviously, but
Yeah.
this is a 5-year anniversary, right,
Yeah.
of COVID, and
Yeah.
I could not have been more proud about how our organization, our community, our partners in the system stepped up and responded to what was a very devastating reality. And
Hmm.
we learned a lot, and we grew, I think, as individuals, we grew as an organization, and we grew from a community point of view because of how we approached it. So very, very proud of that. The key to any of these sorts of situations is what do you learn from it, and
Yeah.
how do you grow? And I think we need to do better, perhaps, in learning from our experiences. And the other area that, if I sort of reflected on this question, we talked a bit about the HPHA right at the beginning.
Hmm.
I'm really proud about how the organization has evolved, right? I mean, hospitals in smaller communities are very visible. As I said earlier, everybody has opinions on them. The way we've been able to grow and manage the organization, I think, and take leadership positions around integrating services, working collectively, I'm really very proud of how that has evolved. It hasn't been without its challenges, obviously, but the fact that we're 22 years into this relationship and we're continuing to focus on moving forward with innovative ideas for change, I'm very proud of that and the momentum that is still there.
And speaking as you as a strong advocate, when you speak about the work you're doing right now and the past few years, you are a strong advocate for integrating services around the unique needs of the population. So I guess for listeners, if you could paint a picture what this means and what does it look like to you?
Yeah, I'm a huge. Those who know me know that I'm a strong proponent of integration and working together. There's a lot of different organizations in the healthcare space, but we all support the same population.
Hmm.
And I think we all have a role, obviously, in that support. But the more we can work together, the better it's going to be for those that we serve. I've had the opportunity to survey with Accreditation Canada for about 25 years. So I've been
Oh.
all across the country and internationally, and had a chance to sort of learn a bit about systems and governance and things like that outside of Ontario. And Ontario is the only province in Canada that still has independent local governance.
Hmm.
And personally, I think that's great. I mean, every province has its strengths in how it approaches things. I happen to like the way things work in Ontario, but it only works, again, in my opinion, if the local governance players are equally focused on their own organization and also the communities that they represent. So you have to
Hmm.
really wear two hats. And so we've really tried to push that as an organization, where we say at our board, we're accountable for the health of the hospitals, but we're also accountable for the health of the population in general. And so we need to work closely with our partners. So one of the things that we did last year, we actually went through accreditation as a partnership through our Ontario Health Team, where we had 10 separately governed organizations under one single umbrella from an accreditation perspective. And we were using accreditation to see if we could integrate, if we could standardize policies, if we could benefit from each other's expertise in ways that we may not have thought about absent applying nationally and internationally vetted standards to what we do. So we put a lot of emphasis on it. And in hospitals today, any hospital in the country, we're doing a lot of things for people who would be better served elsewhere. And
Hmm.
there's lots of reasons why they're not right now. But I think we have to have a different focus on the role of integrated systems, the role of sort of the accountability we have as individual organizations in that. and really push that envelope a bit more, because I think it's one of the best ways we can bring more value not only to those we serve, but also to the system and to policymakers and to funders.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned boards, and you specifically mentioned your board, and give them a good shout out. And I guess, and I'll be asking you a question later on about your personal experience because you sit on a number of boards as
Hmm.
well. But I guess more because of all the leaders listening here, on this podcast, all likely have boards. And so I guess what you talked about of equipping the boards and making sure there's open and transparent communication. Is there any advice you would give to leaders listening on how to ensure that you have an engaged board? And because it sounds like you do, and I think that's because I think sounds to me that it's a partnership between you and the board, not just one person or one individual or one side. It sounds like it's like a harmonious engagement of people coming together to make change happen, to put the community first. So I guess any advice we'd have for leaders listening on how to create that space for positive engagement with the board.
Well, the relationship between a CEO and his board is one of the most important ones, if not the most important relationship that you
Mhm.
have. And I think it again, it goes back to, I'm pretty simple in how I view things. It goes back to trust and relationships
Mhm.
and setting a tone, being accountable. One of the things, when we look at and each board's a bit different and each system is a bit different, but everybody who is interested in joining the HPHA from a governance point of view, and I could not be more fortunate with the board that I have and the boards I've had the opportunity to work with over the years. But people coming in are coming in knowing that this organization is focused equally on internally what it does, but also externally how it
Mhm.
interacts with the broader community. So we're bringing in and attracting people who have that multi sort of faceted focus on what they can bring to the table. So they're not only looking out for the interests of the hospital or the health of the HPHA, but they
Yeah.
know they have a broader role to play in the health of the community. And so we're very fortunate that way. We also try hard, and in Ontario we have what are called Ontario Health Teams. We try to make sure we're very visible at all those tables, making sure that our views are heard and that we're hearing the views of others,
Mhm.
because both inform the decisions that we make. But I think part of it is just being clear on what your expectations are, as
Yes.
an organization, what our expectations are on us as individuals on the board. Like, I sit on the board as well, although I'm ex officio, so I don't have the opportunity to vote. But we still have to have the same mindset
Yeah.
of pushing each other individually, developing each other. We talk a lot about growth and development of leaders and staff and team members. That same lens has to be applied to board, where we
Mhm.
have to make sure board members have the supports that they need, because governing in healthcare it's not it's a bit different than I think in a lot of ways to other governance structures, because it's so visible and
Mhm.
it's so connected from a provincial and a political perspective, that the lens and the skills that you develop are maybe not quite what you're used to if you're coming in from the private sector, and both are equally important and good, but it's a bit of a different environment. So when I talk to new board members who've joined and they've come in, they've got a lot of private sector experience, there's a significant learning curve.
Mhm.
So making sure that we provide those supports and development opportunities. And one of the best organizations in helping in that space is the Ontario Hospital Association. So we try to make sure that we make available to our board members education opportunities that support them from their growth point of view, but also help the organization as it's moving forward.
Glad you mentioned that about the growth and development, because it affects everybody, no matter where you sit in the organization. And I'm glad you also gave a nice shout out to our friends at the OHA as well. It was recently announced that here on Perth has established an stewardship committee. So taking your focus on the environment a step further. So can you share more about this committee and why this focus is so crucial to you and the team?
Yeah, it really ties into what we've talked about throughout this chat around change and innovation, and maybe looking at things differently. And as an organization, over the last few years, we've really started to talk more and more about the role that we can play from a social accountability perspective. And again, it ties back into the, are you looking inward or are you looking outward? And I think we as an organization have again recalibrated around a social accountability focus, around a digital innovation focus, and around a transformation focus. And part of the social accountability is very much how you engage with the environment, right? And so one of the first things that we did was we established an environmental stewardship committee, and we brought team members from across the organization together to really talk about, what role does the hospital play in making a positive contribution to the environment, both internally and
Mhm.
externally. And hospitals do have a significant carbon footprint, as one example, internationally. And so we'll often say, well, what can we do? We're such a small organization, but small steps taken multiple times take you a long way, right? So
Yes.
we are really trying to make sure, and we have a lot of great programs that we've had in place for years around how we engage with the environment, whether it's purchasing policies when we build, the infrastructure that we put in place, how we approach our sites just in general. But this is sort of taking it one step further, where we're engaging our staff in a broader way. But it speaks to our social accountability focus, and I think hospitals have a wonderful opportunity to influence this space. I mean, one of the things that I would have added if you had asked me for more things that I'm proud of. Over 20 years ago, we entered into a partnership with ShelterLink Youth Services, and so we have repurposed space on our Stratford site where ShelterLink offers temporary housing to youth who are homeless. And I mean, it's one of the areas where people will think, well, why are hospitals involved in housing?
Yeah.
Well, the healthier your population is, the healthier the hospital is, right? And one of the best ways to have a healthy population is to make sure that you are socially aware, that you're socially accountable, that you're advancing the social determinants of health and contributing to them in a positive way. And so we're trying to do that in a more visible way now. I think we've been doing it for a long, long time, but perhaps not with the visible markers, and we're trying to do that more and more today.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so glad you mentioned that and you added that in. And I remembered my other question about boards. We at HEROC know you're a board member like you mentioned, at the Ontario Hospital Association, as well as most recently, you've also joined the board of Healthcare Collaboratives Benefits Co. So, what is it about these organizations' mission that resonates with you in your work? And also, maybe adding that point now for you personally, why is giving back through governance important to you?
Yeah, this is a great question, and as I said earlier, with a privilege of being in a sector comes an accountability, I think, to give back. And one of the ways that I've been fortunate to be able to do that is through boards, and I've been on the Ontario Hospital Association board. This is my fifth year, and it's a remarkably dynamic group of individuals who work with an association that is second to none in my view when it
Mhm.
comes to representing the sector and having the ability to inform the direction of health and wellness in this province, in this country. And so I think it's important to try and get your voices heard, either directly or indirectly,
Yeah.
in groups like that. The Healthcare Collaborative Benefit Board, that's brand new, as your listeners may or may not be aware, and it has stemmed from an initiative to share benefits for hospitals and others across
Hmm.
the province. And going back to the focus on partnerships and system thinking and integration, to me, it's a wonderful example of coming together through maybe a different lens than we have in the past, giving up maybe local control over our benefit programs, which is a hugely important program for all of us, for our team,
Hmm.
and recognizing that if we work collectively together, we can either enhance benefits or impact costs, either saving or reducing increases. So I think it's an innovative program that has a lot of benefit for our team members right across the board. And so it's a good example of if you work together collectively, you're stronger. And
Yeah.
that's a big focus of mine, and certainly the healthcare collaborative benefits group is focused on that, and the OHA board and the OHA itself just sets a tone and a bar that is really high in those spaces, and something that I'm very proud to be associated with.
Only because I obviously I met you through our CEO Catherine Galton, and when she speaks
Yeah.
of you, she speaks very highly of how connected you are, Andrew, and how you're at many tables, and how you have, she said you have the pulse of what's happening, what's in the system, what you're hearing, what good and bad, And so I guess my question for you is, taking all that in, and I have personally seen it because I've been at a variety of events where you've been at, where you've had a crowd of people around you, that's a positive thing to see, because that means people want to talk to you and they want to and they want to get your feedback. How do you ensure, because when you have when you're at so many different tables and you're hearing so many different things, and how do you, I guess, prioritize and, kind of, I guess I wouldn't say pinpoint, but ensure that, what you believe in, what your community believes in, your values, all that is conveyed out so that to ensure, that, like you said, that more connection happens, that more partnership is seen in the system, and that we're not siloed. Like, is there something you personally think about as you talk to all these different folks and community and government and associations and people like HEROC too? Is there something you personally do to say, here's how I'm going to enter this room today, or here's how I'm going to what I'm going to focus on in this meeting as a leader?
Yeah. Well, if there's any Shrek fans listening, you may remember when the princess first met Donkey,
Yeah.
and she
Fiona,
says to Shrek, "Oh my God, your donkey can talk." And Shrek says, "Yeah, shutting him up's the problem." So yeah, no, but I am I love the fact that I have the opportunity to engage with lots of people,
yeah,
and I think it's a role of leadership, right? I mean, if you're
yeah.
not if you're not aware of the environment around you, it's kind of hard to make the right decisions for the
Hmm.
organization that you represent. And I think when I survey, I mentioned I've been across the country, and the first thing I say when I meet with boards at the beginning of the survey is there's not a single organization that I've been into that cannot learn from every other organization I've been into.
Hmm.
In
Yeah.
other words, everybody has value to bring to a conversation. And I
Yes.
think the key is, as we approach things, issues and development, we have to have that recognition. We've got to recognize that every conversation is a good one, and every conversation we learn, right? And
Yeah.
I think if you don't put yourself out there, and if you're not trying to understand and appreciate the views and vision of others, you really don't make the best local decisions. And I'm, very lucky that my board supports that, because they recognize that, as an organization, the HPHA is stronger when not just me, a lot of our team members are out in different ways, working with their peers and partners across the system. But I think it makes us all stronger.
Yeah.
If we're more aware of what goes on, and you really realize when you go across and talk to people that we have way more similarities than differences. And I think learning from our partners is one of the best things we can do for our own organizations.
Hey, it's Abby here. You know me from HEROC's Healthcare Changemakers podcast. I'm so excited to tell you all about a new show we're working on this year. I'll be co-hosting Share, Scale, Repeat alongside Trevor Hall. You know him as HEROC's Vice President of Healthcare Safety and Risk Management. Trevor, maybe you can give our listeners a bit of a teaser.
Absolutely. Share, Scale, Repeat is a podcast about how even the smallest idea can spark big change. It's about discovery, understanding, and exploring complex topics that we don't always talk about in healthcare. It's about sharing and scaling knowledge and experiences, what may work, and importantly, lessons in trying.
Trevor and his team hear so many amazing ideas through HEROC's Safety Grants program. So every episode, we'll be sitting down with an expert to understand a complex risk issue, and most importantly, explore ways we're trying to reduce this risk.
That's right, Abby. What's so cool about some of these projects we've helped support and fund over the years is that many of them can be scaled at organizations right across the country. We just need to get the word out. Ultimately, it's about partnering to create the safest healthcare systems.
We'll be bringing the first episode to you wherever you get your podcasts this spring. So for now, follow, share, scale, repeat, so you'll be ready when we drop new episodes. Thanks for listening.
I'm going to ask you a few questions, and you can answer them with one word answer, or however long you want to speak about it. But the first question is, when you've had a hard day at work, what boosts your mood?
Well, if I'm really lucky, the Ottawa Senators are playing the
Ah.
Maple Leafs and they beat them that night. That really helps. But no, I would say, family and specifically Amara. So Amara is my little granddaughter.
Aw.
I highly recommend grandchildren to anybody who's thinking
Aw.
about it. I should tell you that right now. But you need to have a lot of things in your life, and having a young granddaughter is wonderful for perspective. And when
Ah.
you're having a bad day, I think it's important to maintain perspective. And I talk to our team when I meet new kids when we have orientation. I always say to them and remind them, no matter how bad your day may be, it's not as bad as most of the people who are coming into our organizations for
Yes.
care, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so perspective is a wonderful thing, I think, to boost your mood, and I try and focus hard on that. But as I said, having a granddaughter is a wonderful way to do that.
Oh, that's sweet. And keeping with family, I guess what's the biggest thing you've learned from your parents, or someone who helped shape you as you were on your journey in life?
Sure. Well, I think I was probably, when I was younger, I was like every kid. I didn't think my parents really knew anything about anything
That's
at
true.
all. But I look back, the thing that I learned from them, I mean, a lot of things, but the one that I'll just share here is the importance of taking risks.
Mm.
And, at the time, I didn't really appreciate it because I was only 5 years old, but we were in England. We lived in England, and
Oh.
my parents decided that they were going to move to Canada. So they left their entire safety network. They left their family. They took two young kids, moved to Ottawa. On week 3, my dad slipped and snapped his leg in half and was in
Oh my
hospital
gosh.
for anyway. But I look back on that now and I realize how hard that must have been for them. But they did it because they felt it was the right thing to do. And I look at sort of my career, and Danielle and myself. Danielle's my wife. We were in Ottawa in 1991, and a job came up in Stratford, and not to be dismissive in any way, but I'd never heard of Stratford in 1991. But we thought it was a good opportunity, so applied for the job. Was fortunate enough to get it. Danielle
Oh.
had to quit her job. We moved to a community that we didn't know anybody. Best decision we ever made. But
Oh.
it was about taking risks, and I think I learned that from my parents, that sometimes you've got to be willing to get out of your comfort zone to make a difference or make a change, and that's what they taught me, and it certainly played out in my life.
Wow, that's great advice. Okay, yeah, now you have to finish this sentence. If I wasn't in healthcare, I'd be doing.
I would be on a big game charter boat fishing in the Caribbean. That's what I would be doing.
Wow.
Yeah,
And
I
before,
one of my joys. I love fishing, and so now I recognize that what you watch on a fishing show and what's actually reality are two very different things. So I might not have it as a long term, but that's certainly something that would be right at the top of my list.
no, it's a good thing. And
Yeah,
before we went live, listeners, Andrew was just telling me about how he went ice fishing yesterday and had a great day out with the sun too.
yeah.
Who is a living leader you most admire?
This was a really interesting question because I would have answered it differently 2 months ago than I'm answering it today. It's kind of odd, right? But
Right?
yeah, I'm going to say, and there's a lot of people I admire around the world.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say Jean Chrétien. And the reason I say that is, he is an individual who he's been around a long time in the political space. He always sets a bar of integrity that
Hmm.
I think is so important in leadership.
Yeah.
I'm politically agnostic. I voted for all major parties provincially and federally over my voting life. So I say this not because I'm a liberal, but I just really appreciate the perspective. And if you listen to him on the weekend at 91, when he was at the Liberal convention, when Mark Carney was tapped to replace Prime Minister Trudeau, his talk again was very inspiring, very poignant, and a really good reminder of the important role we as individuals play, not only
Hmm.
in our own world and our own space, but more broadly on behalf of the country that we have the privilege of living in.
Absolutely. It was very clear, transparent communication, easy to digest message. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
What's one meal, this is very different, what's one meal you could eat for a week straight and not get sick of, Andrew?
Well, I'm a guy, so I can eat most food for a week straight and not
Yeah,
get
it's true.
sick of it. But if I had to pick, I actually really love I love Chinese food, and one of the things that I used to do if I was home alone. I would buy enough Chinese food takeout for a whole week. So I've done it, and it works out really, really well. So I would say that, or close second, spaghetti.
Yeah, no, Chinese. I love it. Those are
Yeah.
good ones. And only because I wasn't gonna. Just thought of this question not only because again, like I hear the passion in your voice of the impact you want to make, and so I was reading on reading on the weekend about how people who hear the word no, like so in their career or whatever, or it could have been something as simple as like, oh no, you can't do that, or no, this job's not for you, or whatever the case may be. It could be in any situation. And I'm sure as a leader, you've probably heard the word no from somebody or somewhere. What did you do with that no? Did you say, okay, shrug your shoulders and, or did you say to yourself and whatever that no you heard that really rallied your own personal being to be like, you know what, I'm going to make an impact here and I'm going to make a difference. And so I guess my question is, have you ever heard no and that particular no really fired you up to make change in your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. I look at it, maybe I'd instead of the word no, I might say adversity,
Okay.
because we all face adversity, and I think one of the defining attributes of the best leaders are when they're faced with adversity, they turn it into as much of a positive as they can.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go right back to COVID. We talked about that earlier. A lot of people said, okay, this is a really crappy reality we've been faced with. What are we going to do to get through it in as positive a way as we can? So I think, when the word no comes up, and if I'm talking to people, and I talk to a lot of people, who have talked to me for career advice, and they may apply for a job and they may not get the job that they wanted. It's how do you learn from the situation that you're in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we've all seen people that get angry if things don't work out. They check out if things don't work out. And I think the ones who ultimately succeed are the ones who take no as an opportunity to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and to the next time come at things a little bit differently, perhaps, because your career is for the most part an evolution, right?
Yeah.
And I think how you respond and react to situations is important, and constant learning is key. We talk a lot about mentoring and being a mentee, and I obviously have the privilege of having people who look to me as a mentor, but I always say to them, I actually am learning from you equally in this conversation. So it's always having that mindset that regardless of how a specific situation may end up, you're learning from it and you're pulling the good from it, and you're trying to improve yourself in whatever way the situation might point to.
Yeah, I'm so happy I asked that question because I feel like we ended off our conversation on an amazing note. And I think as you were talking more and more, I was like, you know what, I'm going to make sure that we somehow get this particular episode into the classrooms of MBA programs across the country because you gave some really good advice, Andrew. Thank you so much.
Well, you're too kind. Just always remember, too, some of the best learnings I've ever had were from bad situations. So this could have both effects on people, right? Yeah.
No,
Oh,
no.
God, don't do that. Yeah.
No, this is all positive. I'm so glad that Catherine tapped you on the shoulder to come on the show. So with that said, thank you so much, Andrew, for chatting with us, taking time out of your really busy day. We at HEROC and all our listeners really appreciate it.
Well, and thank you to you and the HEROC team. We've had a long-standing relationship with you, and great organization, set a really high bar in a lot of different ways, and I very much value that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can hear more episodes of Healthcare Changemakers on our website, HEROC.com, and on your favorite podcasting apps. If you like what you hear, please rate us or post a review. Healthcare Changemakers is recorded by HEROC's communications and marketing team and produced by Podfly Productions. Follow us on Twitter at HEROC Group or email us at communications@heroc.com. We'd love to hear from you.